Thank you, Presiding Officer. The power to assert our position as an independent coastal state with full, unfettered access across our waters, or a plan to go back into the common fisheries policy with no controls at all. Which of these does the First Minister think is the best plan for our fishermen?
First Minister.
Well, what I think, Presiding Officer, is that the Tories raising fishing today is something of an early Christmas present in a political sense. Now, Jackson Carlaw's attack on me on fishing appears to be because I continue to support membership of the European Union. The strange thing about that attack is that so does Jackson Carlaw. And so does Ruth Davidson. Here's Ruth Davidson on the 1st of October 2018, just a few short weeks ago. Well, like I say, I voted to remain. I fought for remain. If there was another vote tomorrow, I would still vote remain. So on that issue, there is no difference, it would appear, between myself and the Scottish Conservatives. Where there is a difference is that SNP MPs on the 11th of December will vote against the Tory deal that sells out Scottish fishermen. Because we know that Tory pledges on fishing are not worth the paper they're written on. Let's have a look at them. The Tories said there would be annual negotiations rather than an overall agreement. The political declaration, though, commits to an overall agreement. The Tories said no link between access to waters and access to markets. The political declaration makes clear there will be such a link. And far from leaving the common fisheries policy behind, the EU statement makes clear that the new agreement will build on the common fisheries policy. Now, the Tories say ignore all that. We'll get what we want at the end of the day. But the Tories have handed all of the leverage to the European Union, because unless the UK agrees to their rules in fishing, they will block a trade deal, and it takes just one country to do that. The truth of the matter is, and I'm delighted that Jackson Carlaw has given me the opportunity today to highlight this, the Tories, just as they did on the UK's way into the European Union, are selling out Scottish fishermen on the way out.
Jackson Carlaw.
What I actually gave the First Minister the opportunity to do was answer a question, but as is so often the case, it's clear that the First Minister reads out the answer to the question she would prefer was asked, rather than the question that is actually asked. Presiding Officer, the Scottish Fishermen's Federation has been absolutely clear. They say that under the Prime Minister's Brexit deal, the UK will be out of the CFP and that the UK will become an independent coastal state. More than this, they confirmed just yesterday in an email to every member of this chamber, their backing for the Prime Minister's withdrawal agreement and the political declaration. That's their position. Is the First Minister seriously trying to tell us that she knows more about fish than the Scottish Fishermen's Federation?
First Minister.
Well, Jackson Carlaw wants to trade quotes. I'm happy to indulge him. Here's the Scottish Creel Fishermen's Federation. Well, I can only talk personally, having had these years behind me, and I really wouldn't trust the Tories as far as I could throw them. Whenever it comes to fishing, it's always been a sacrificial lamb. So is Jackson Carlaw saying that he knows more about fishing than the Scottish Creel Fishermen's Federation? The fact of the matter is, I know the Tories are desperate to spare their own blushes on this, but they are rewriting history. See, the commitment was never just... They don't like this, but they're going to hear it. The commitment was never just about being an independent coastal state. That's the bare minimum. What the Tories promised was annual negotiations. Now we know there's going to be an overall agreement. They promised no link between access to waters and access to markets. The political declaration makes clear that there will be that link. And of course, the statement issued by the European Union makes it clear that they are going to demand an arrangement that builds upon the common fisheries policy. So I say to Jackson Carlaw again, and no amount of bluff and bluster from him today will take away from this fact. The Scottish Tories, yet again, have sold out Scottish fishermen. Shame on them.
Jackson Carlaw.
Shame on you, concludes the First Minister. You know, if shame was a currency, the First Minister's pockets would be bursting. In fact, if shame was a currency, she might even be able to fill the black hole in her independence financial plans as well. Because what the First Minister is actually saying is she does know better than the Scottish Fishermen's Federation. And the reason the First Minister won't back the Scottish Fishermen's Federation position is because she can't. She's trapped by her own policy in Europe. The plain fact is that for all their posturing and pompous outrage, the SNP's policy is to rejoin the EU, and therefore, because there is no way round this, to rejoin the Common Fisheries Policy. Here's what it says. Article 38.1 of the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union says that being a member of the European Union, as she wishes an independent Scotland to be, means you have to sign up to the Common Fisheries Policy. There are no reviews, there is no reform. It's not a question of liking it, it's a question of lumping it. Isn't it simply deceiving people, First Minister, to pretend this is anything other than a fact?
First Minister.
I'm sorry, Jackson Carlaw really has to explain this a bit more simply to people, because he says that all of that flows from the fact that I want Scotland and indeed the UK to remain in the European Union. But again, I would say to him, so does he, or so he says. When Ruth Davidson says, if there was another vote tomorrow, I would still vote Remain, it seems to me that she wants Scotland still to be a member of the European Union. So if all of what Jackson Carlaw says flows from that, then it applies to Ruth Davidson as much as it applies to anybody else. Jackson Carlaw also talks about the Scottish Fishermen's Federation pledge and attacks me for somehow not signing it. The Prime Minister yesterday refused to sign the Scottish Fishermen's Federation pledge. But you see, we don't need to sign a pledge because we will do what matters. On the 11th of December, in that vote, on that deal that sells out Scottish fishermen, SNP MPs will vote against it. The question for Jackson Carlaw, are all these MPs that are going to sign that pledge, will they vote against that deal or not? Yes or no?
Jackson Carlaw.
The First Minister's advisers have given her a thick folder of answers to questions I haven't asked. I didn't mention any pledge to her. But since she asks, the Prime Minister did the deal that is going to deliver the pledge. So let's just sum up the SNP's position. They accuse Theresa May of selling out in fishing, but it's them who would drag us straight back into the CFP. They demand a renegotiation. With whom? The Chancellor of Germany, the Chancellor of Austria, the Prime Minister of France, the President of the EU, the President of the European Council, the EU's lead negotiator, the Taoiseach of the Republic of Ireland, and even Guy Verhofstadt, together with every other European leader, says this is it. This is the only deal on the table. They say, and I say, back a deal that delivers an orderly exit, protects jobs and delivers more control of our waters than we've had for half a century. She says, vote down the deal, meaning more chaos, more upheaval, and all in the hope that it will deliver her obsession with a second independence referendum. That's not in Scotland's interests. That is not standing up for Scotland.
First Minister.
You know, there's something starting to become very clear at First Minister's questions, and that is the redder Jackson Carlaw's face gets. The more he points wildly across the chamber, the more trouble he is in. You know, he asked me to support a deal that is bad for Scotland and bad for the UK, when the Prime Minister right now can't even persuade her own party to back that deal. That is the reality. Well, the SNP will continue to do what the SNP always does. We will stand up. We will stand up for Scotland. This deal will take Scotland out of the European Union against our will. It will take us out of the single market against our economic interests. It will put us at a potential competitive disadvantage with Northern Ireland, and into the bargain, it will sell out Scottish fishermen. And all along, yes, I have to say to Jackson Carlaw, who talks about the SNP using Brexit to advance the case for independence. Well, let me say to him, Brexit does that all by itself. It doesn't need any help from the SNP. And of course that line, that threadbare line, is just a device for the Tories, because the opposite is true. They're exploiting independence to avoid hard questions on Brexit. It will not wash. People see right through it, and increasingly they're seeing right through Jackson Carlaw and all of his Tory cronies as well.